Whenever I say my PENDREAM TV there, I see them yopo.
West Africa is in serious turmoil. And if care is not taken, West Africa is likely to become the new Ukraine.
The new Ukraine?
Yes. I mean, I have no doubt at all about it. First of all, if you take the whole of the region, West Africa sub-region, it has a population of over 500 million people. Out of this population of over 500 million people, Nigeria alone accounts for 50% of the total population of West Africa.
50%?
About 50% of the total population of West Africa. Nigeria has a population of between 220 and 230 million people. Okay. So any crisis in Nigeria is likely to have a ripple effect, throughout the region. Now you have a situation in which, if you go to the northeast of Nigeria, you have the Boko Haram insurgency. And then you go to the Niger Delta area, and there's a low-intensity civil war. And to the east of Nigeria is also a thriving secessionist movement. Okay. So, this alone is a serious problem for West Africa. The Nigerian crisis itself is a major problem for West Africa. But there is more. Now, you go to the Sahel, and there are two insurgencies building up in the whole of the Sahel. There's the attempt by the Islamic State to take over countries in the Sahel. And then there is the Azawad movement, which aims at establishing the independent Republic of the Azawad in the Sahel, and that cuts across many countries. Now, if you take Burkina Faso, the last time I checked, 50% of the territory of Burkina Faso was under the control of insurgents, Islamic insurgents. 50% of the territory. Now, these insurgents have been active, not just in Burkina Faso, but in Guinea, in Mali, and other places. And indeed, there is some record which indicates that the insurgents have attacked northern Togo, and they've attacked northern Benin as well. There have been incidents of insurgent attacks also in La Côte d'Ivoire. So on account of these insurgencies by the Azawad movement and also by the ISIS and so on, West Africa is West Africa is in serious trouble. I've seen intelligence reports on Ghana which suggest that some of the insurgents have managed to infiltrate Ghana and to establish what they call sleeping cells. And the last report that I read, the last intelligence report that I read, indicated that some of the insurgents have infiltrated Ghana all the way south, beyond Tamale. This is a frightening situation. Then you've had the instability in Chad, following the removal of the president. And then, of course, the coup d'etats in Burkina Faso, in Mali, and also in Guinea. And only last week, another coup d'etat in Niger. This is a crisis, you understand? But then on the back of all this is also the anti-West, anti-France, feather, which is sweeping across the West African sub-region. That adds to the instability, that adds to the crisis. Then, on top of all of this, you also have the establishment of foreign military bases in West Africa, and it's frightening. Ghana has signed a defense agreement to the United States of America, which gives the United States so many concessions, which actually gives a U.S. soldier more privileges than privileges accorded to diplomats under the Geneva Convention. Okay. We know as a fact that Terminal 1 of the Accra International Airport has been dedicated to the use of the U.S. Army. And then, of course, we know about the U.S. military base also in Niger. We know the French have a network of military bases across West Africa. Recently, we also do know as a fact that the Wagner Group is also developing its foothold in West Africa. And we know as a fact that they are in Mali. We know also as a fact that they're in Burkina Faso and so on. And there's a lot more. Of course, there's piracy in the Atlantic Ocean, which adds to the very complex security situation. Now, on top of all of this, has come the coup in Niger. And Randy, I don't know how to say it, in a better way. I don't know how to say it in a nice way. The current crop of leaders in West Africa are the most reckless that we have seen in the history of the world. Extremely reckless leaders who have no commitment to the development of democracy, whose only interest is to protect their hold on power. And that is going to deepen the crisis in West Africa. And I'll explain. Alassane Ouattara, the circumstances under which he came to power can be discussed. Of course, I think that it was imposed by the French military following the overthrow of Laurent Gbagbo, by the French military. But that is not even the point. Alassane Ouattara actually amends his country's constitution to give himself a third term. And these presidents who today are crying against coup d'etats and so on, went and congratulated him on messing up with his country's constitution, giving himself a third term. This president, where is their legitimacy? All of them. Where is their legitimacy? They were happy with Alassane Ouattara amending the constitution of La Côte d'Ivoire and imposing himself again as head of state. They went to congratulate him. Put that aside. Mali. When the president there was killing people, detaining people without charge or trial, ordering his soldiers to attack peaceful protesters and so on, these heads of states were causing with him. They didn't have any problem at all with him. You understand? These heads of states who today are calling for democracy, when the Islamic insurgents were attacking these countries, killing their soldiers, making life unbearable for them, they sat in their cozy presidential palaces and did nothing. Now there's a coup d'etat. They have the nerve to look into our faces and say they are mobilizing soldiers with our resources to go and fight to restore a discredited head of state to power in Niger. What is wrong with these West African heads of states? Something must be wrong with them. They are not thinking right. They are exceedingly reckless. The worst case scenario, my brother, look at Tinubu, who was recently sworn in as head of state of Nigeria. Your own election results are being contested. Evidence is being sent to court which shows massive rigging and so on. You are not dealing with that situation in your country. You want to mobilize troops to go and fight in Niger. What? Have you been able to fight Boko Haram? Have you been able to deal with the low-intensity civil war in the Niger Delta? Have you been able to contain the secessionist movement in the east of your country? And then you have the effrontery to call your colleagues to Abuja and to give a warning that in a week, if they don't hand over to the old president, we are marching troops into Niger. What's wrong with you? I mean, what is happening in West Africa is incredible. In any case, my brother, based on what we see, based on international media reports and so on, these coup leaders are far more popular than the so-called democratically elected leaders in West Africa. When ECOWAS sent a delegation to Mali, you saw what the people of Mali did. They massed up in their hundreds of thousands to protest against these ECOWAS leaders. As a matter of fact, in many of these West African countries, if there's a coup tomorrow, people will jubilate. They will mass up in their hundreds of thousands in support of the coup d'etats. What legitimacy do these heads of states have to play the role they want to play in Niger? And it is clear that all of this is in furtherance of French ambition in West Africa. If you go to France, 1 of every 3 electric bulbs, 1 out of 3, 33% of electricity in France is generated with uranium from Niger. The French have an interest in maintaining their hold on Niger just for their energy supplies. And you want to send Ghanaian soldiers to Niger to go and die so that France can continue to dominate the exploitation of the uranium resources of Niger. What's wrong with you? You want to send Ghanaian soldiers, people's husbands and wives, and so on, to go and die in Niger so that France can continue to benefit. It doesn't make any sense. Okay? Now, there's another dimension that I think we need to look at. Randy, every French-speaking African state, all of them, they keep their foreign reserves in the Central Bank of France. Okay. Now, what does that mean? French-speaking African countries are borrowing their own money, and paying interest on borrowing their own money. Does this make sense? It simply doesn't make sense. And yet these West African leaders, instead of working on their own promise to develop a West African currency, so that this exploitation of French-speaking African countries can be eradicated, they are going to wage war on Niger. To do what? To achieve what? To achieve what? I am so disgusted with these West African leaders. I looked at the map of Africa yesterday. And you can look at the map of Africa yesterday. In fact, I wish I've never been very good at drawing the map of Africa, but it's
always sketching.
Yeah, but as for map of Africa, it's a little difficult for me. Something like this. If you look at the map, a whole block like this, is occupied by these regimes. So effectively, Chad, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali have effectively, geographically, divided North Africa and South Africa. They are sitting in the middle there. Any reckless military adventure here can bring the whole of Africa down. The whole of Africa in severe turmoil. Now, we should not also forget the fact that you have the Wagner Group operating in 2/3 of these countries. Yesterday, I read reports that Prigozhin.
So, Kwesi, that's a map.
Yeah, they occupied that stretch. Prigozhin is preparing to move with his Wagner Group into Niger. The risk of an internationalized conflict in West Africa is so high. That's why I'm talking about the second Ukraine.
So they're moving in there to support the coup.
Well, they consider the government in Niger as a legitimate government, and they're dealing with the government in Niger, which must have invited them to help fight insurgency and so on. So they will be there. Now, if you are there and you attack, you'll be attacking them. What are the implications for the whole of the region? I want to urge West African leaders to begin to put on their thinking caps. The caps have been off for too long.
David Kama, Mamena PENDREAM TV ase. Now, so far so good. Say open online portal e Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.